Hello everybody, John here, and today onto the garage we start to tick off the big list of things to fix on LED Elgrand, and we'll kick off with the big one, which is the wheel bearings. I have a set for all round, but front seems to be where the main noise is coming from, and there's no point in doing that without doing the brake pads at the same time, because I'm going to be disassembling the same things. Well, now we've got her in the garage, what we're going to do is get her off the ground, get the wheels off so that I can start looking through things. I think I'm going to go straight for remove the brakes, remove the wheel bearings. But in order to slacken off the wheels, we need the wheels on the ground. I've left the handbrake off and she's in neutral, so she's going to roll around. So I'm just going to put a bit of weight underneath the vehicle with the ramp, so that things don't start sliding around and moving around the shop. Okay, so a quick inspect. First thing, discs appear to be in good condition. There's a little bit of a lip, but it's smooth. They've not been scraping, and I'm happy with those. Also happy to report the use of copper slip grease on the hub and on the studs, which means this has been looked after by somebody who knows what they were doing, actually cared about the vehicle and cared about coming to it again later and servicing it. So that's very good. This is the source of the noise, I believe, on the front suspension, and hopefully just replacing that gaiter will get rid of the racket and it all makes sense. And as for wheel bearing, we can't really tell till we take the brakes off if that feels rough or not, because you're always feeling the drag of the brakes. So you can see condition underneath is rather lovely. 17 years old, and I'm quite happy with that. Rear brakes, much smaller contact point. Don't kid yourselves into thinking that this is a fault, or the disc is worn because of this. The contact point for the rear pads is narrow because they are very small, which is a little odd because there's such a large diameter. I'm guessing that's because of the effectiveness of the handbrake needed a big drum, and therefore you end up with this rather big disc when the contact point is rather small. It's all about leverage, so the further out this pad is, the better your brakes, but equally it is narrow. Dampers on the rear, appears all fine, and again, condition looks rather lovely. See the multi-link suspension. This is no average van. Okay, so next we're going to take the brakes off. I need to take them off to get to the bearings, and I need to take them off to change the brake pads. So I'm going to take the caliper off of the carrier first. Off the carrier. My wife's always correcting me for a little grammatical flaw. You only need one. You don't need off of. 17mm. a rubber mallet. These won't be excessively tight, they shouldn't be anyway. But grime and dirt in the wheel well mean they're a bit stuck, so a bit of impact is going to help no end. Well greased and in good condition. This has been well looked after. Japanese home market vehicles do tend to be rather well serviced. There's not a huge culture for second-hand vehicles in Japan. Don't get me wrong, they exist, and certainly amongst the tuner community and all that sort of thing, and younger folk. But generally, people like to buy a new vehicle and they'll keep it until it's done. And in doing so, they very often look after it properly, get it serviced properly, and that's all good news if you want to do a grey import. It hasn't been through generally lots and lots of hands whilst in Japan. Just a vacuum of the grease was holding that in place. Interesting. Okay, next tool you're going to need is a bungee cord or rope, because if you're going to take your brake caliper off, you don't want to hang it from its own flexible hose and risk damaging it, creating another job for yourself. So over the spring, and then I've got a hook that I can use to take some of the weight off this caliper as soon as I've got it off. Next, okay, rubber mallet. Just give it a bit of a bash left and right. There we go. And we've got twin pot calipers, single-sided. Seals look good. Okay, all good news there at the moment. Let's use my hooks. There we go. To take the weight of that, and it's not dangling off that hose. And in this position, we're now able to slide out our brake pads. We have a spring clip here. It's just pushed into a little hole in the edge of the pad on the bottom end. And I'm just going to pull that out into my little magnetic tray. And the pads should slide out at the bottom, with little hooks stopping them sliding out at the top. Pull forward and you can wiggle them out. And of course that's not disgusting. So this one had a few miles left in it, but I'm more than happy to be changing them. It's just good practice on a new to me vehicle. Okay. There's a little clip-on back plate there, which is generally a anti-squeal device. We'll see if anything comes with the new pads. If not, we'll just unclip that and pop it on. And same with the back one. Get a little wriggle, and out she comes. So what we'll do next is take the carrier out, and that's 2 bolts, one here, one here, and one here. And then 19mm. See if we can loosen it with a hammer and a couple of blows again. If not, we'll get the breaker bar on it. Is it gone? Oh, the joys of saltless roads. it is quite demoralising as a keen amateur mechanic that, you know, I do all sorts of work on my cars, constantly playing around and cleaning up, and you come back to them, the same area, a year or 18 months later, and it looks like it's all been under the sea, because the just conditions in the UK are so corrosive because of our insistence on super safety on the roads, and, which I get, but the method I don't like, which is salting. And the salt destroys the roads. It's a contributor to things like potholes. And in turn, wet weather means you're constantly washing the underside of your car whenever the road is wet with a salty road muck poultice. And that's the carrier off, which in turn allows us to just pull the disc off, and that is the cause of my noise. Just going to take my microphone off my lapel, stick it there in case that makes a difference. That is a bearing that's had enough. Ironically, there's no play in it whatsoever, which is probably why nobody else has picked up on it. But it's done for. So what we're going to do now is take out the 4 bolts from the back that are holding this bearing carrier hub in place. Start off by just getting some WD-40 near the threads. And I got my impact driver. If I can get access. Impacts are good, so that one's gone. Second one has. You need quite a thin-walled socket to get in back here. There's basically little pockets that the bolts are in, and if your socket's too chunky, so I've switched over to my breaker bar. Hopefully the vibrations will have helped anyway. Yeah, so that one is moving. Well, no one can pretend that was easy. In the end, how I got it out was warming this area. Nothing excessive, just a normal blow lamp. Putting the bolts back in these holes from the back, except for a few threads, so loosened off slightly. Hitting the heads of those bolts, covering the end of the bearing with some aluminium and giving that a slap with a hammer, and working the back of the flange with a hammer, and it's just a very time consuming job, and I am wore out. It took me about an hour and a half to get that one out, and there it is on the bench. Now I've got this enormous nut to undo. That's the bit that was stuck. Okay, so I broke this free off camera because there was swearing involved. But all I've done, put one of the nuts on and a piece of nice solid metal in my vise, dropped a couple of the studs one side of that, and then 42mm socket on a breaker bar, and judicious use of heat on the side of the nut, just to make it let go a little bit more. So you've got to get that thing off. Not the easiest. Once you've loosened it off, all is good. Next, we want to get the stub with this flange on out of the bearing. This flatted washer comes off. It's basically a spacer. All we need to do now is press that out. You could use a hammer, but press is obviously going to be more efficient and easier. I decided in the end it'd be easier to use a puller, just because of access to the right spots to pull against. Yay! There we go. Whew. So as you can see, we've pushed a shaft through, but it's taken the inner race with it. So still some work to do. There we go. Now we've got to get this inner race out. Gone. Turned. We have succeeded. Hooray! My conclusion is Elgrand, two-wheel drive, front wheel bearings, bit of a bugger. Heavy work, even if you've got decent kit around you. Probably worth getting a complete rebuilt hub, and even then it's still going to be a bit of an effort. Right, I'm tired, so I'm going to leave it here for tonight, but that is fine. This needs just cleaning up with a bit of wet and dry, really fine, smoothing off. The face of the flange I will dress with an oil stone just to make sure there's no bruises. I have put one bruise on it that has probably affected the front, but I'll deal with that. And then rebuild. Time for tea. Okay, so we've cleaned up the hub. Just going to spray a little bit of WD-40 on as a light lubricant. Then we've got our new bearing, which I'm going to put on, he says. I'm supporting the hub just on its end face, not on the studs. Getting this to start straight is the big secret, if there is such a thing on this. And I've got an old inner race, so I'm only pushing the centre race of the bearing. I'm not pushing around the edges. Also important because on this vehicle there is an ABS sensor ring built into the bearing. It's basically a magnetic track made of plastic, and you do not want to be pushing on that. That's it. And now I just got to do that. And smooth, smooth, smooth. Whatever you do, don't forget to put your little shield back on before you start this, else you're going to have a lot of swearing to do when you recognise it and you've reinstalled everything. That way up. Might need a little bit of adjustment once it's in place. Just to give you an impression of how badly rust affects things. I spent an hour and a half, something like that, trying to get this out. Cleaned it up with some emery cloth, nothing aggressive. New bearing. Slides in. How annoying, hmm? So I'm just going to put this back on. There we go. Now, put the bolts in from the back to line everything up. One. First one, probably going to be the hardest one. This disc is in really good condition, but because I'm going to put new pads on, I'm just going to dress off this slight ridge where the rust on the edges started to overlap to give the pads the best chance of staying intact. Just going to use a power file for that. Don't touch this surface, just the outer edge. brake cleaner and on. Next step, brake carrier. Next, the brake pads. Just adjust my chair. Oh, I put a link to this in a previous video, but it's way on back. Lots of people ask me about it. Yeah, little collapsible stool. You can make it literally any height that you want, and you could even keep it in the boot of your car if you really want, because it's so small. But yeah, I find it very, very useful just to sit me at the right height. I'll put a link in the video here as well, just so anybody who's still interested and can't find the original video can find it there. Right, brakes. New ones. They're Eicher. Not the tippity-toppy-list of quality, but very good. Very reasonable. Interesting, it says Nissan Pathfinder and X-Trail, as well as the Elgrand. So useful to know. Let's go in there. Nicely packaged, because they're sealed up in pairs. That's nice. Package open. They come with the clipped-on anti-squeal pads, so nothing to do except install. Interestingly, they don't have the little hole in the outer edge that the others had, with the spring clip to push them apart, so that is a downer. But in they go. That rough sound is partly because the disc isn't yet centralised, but also partly because the slight edge is catching on the pads. That's gone almost immediately. So that's in. Next, we're going to put our caliper back. Might need to push back the pistons to get your new brakes in. I'm just going to try and do it by hand, pulling against the new brake pad. But I'm struggling a little, so just going to get a G-clamp. I always call these G-clamps. I've also aware that a lot of people call them C-clamps, which makes a lot of sense as well. And also cramps rather than clamps. Even though I'm an engineer, time served, apprenticeship, all that, I couldn't tell you internationally which one is correct in inverted commas. There we go. We're in. Ooh, the hammer's gone crazy. These are already nicely greased up, slide pins. Well, I'm very pleased to report that after putting this back together and running it around on the road, the noises, the droning has gone. So I've only changed the front wheel bearings and pads at this stage, but it was quite obvious when you took them off that the noise was coming from the front bearings. So I've got a prop shaft centre bearing still on my bench, and I've got rear bearings. And to be fair, I think I'm going to give myself a little bit of a rest break from doing bearings. That was really quite tough physical work, hammering the things out. So I'll do that another day when I've got time, and probably when I'm doing another task that involves rear wheels off, etc. So for now, she's completely rumble free. If you're enjoying our channel, then don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell icon so you get notifications of new videos. And please give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, and you can share the videos. And below the video is always the area where you can comment and get involved with the chat.